Mm. Uh, yeah, well, let's get into some climate change news. Um, yeah, there still are some places experiencing some hot weather, and I guess we're supposed to be getting some kind of heat wave in California. I don't know where everybody else is at as far as people in Northern California, but anyways, California's wildfire threat to spike as an unusually strong heat dome builds. This is from actually 2 days ago. Twice during the past 2 months, intense domes of hot, high pressure have sprawled over the West Coast, bringing record setting temperatures and desiccating winds. An unprecedented wildfire disaster has ensued with more than 3.6 million acres going up in flames in California alone since August 15th. Five of California's top 20 largest fires on record have all taken place in 2020, and at least 26 people have perished in these blazes. Now, warning signs are again flashing red as another pronounced heat dome builds over the region. It is forecast to lead to more record high temperatures and bursts of fire fanning winds. The National Weather Service has posted red flag warnings for critical fire weather conditions for the East Bay, North Bay Hills near San Francisco from Saturday through Monday. Excuse me. Winds from the north will eventually come out of the east, blowing from land to sea, increasing temperatures and dropping humidity percentages into the teens and single digits. The Weather Service office in San Francisco predicted the strongest winds between Sunday evening, that's tonight, and Monday morning. Computer model trends are favoring stronger winds than were previously anticipated, forecasters wrote in a technical discussion. Update, this is a tweet from Daniel Swain. Big heat wave, extremely dry air mass still on track. Unfortunately, models also trending a bit stronger and more widespread with offshore winds over NorCal this weekend. Maybe we'll play this. No, maybe not. So these were forecasts from a couple days ago. It's not really that hot right here, although it's been getting up into the 90s during the day. Whoops, sorry about that. Where am I? Help, lost it. Somewhere in here. Okay, to be clear, this event is nowhere near the strength of the 2017 Wine Country, 2018 Camp, or the 2019 Kincaid fires, the Weather Service wrote. Speaking of some of the most deadly and destructive blazes in that region during the past few years, however, the setup is still critical. I don't know. What's everybody? We have a lot of people in the Northern California, Oregon, Washington region. High temperatures in the Sacramento Valley may exceed 100 degrees during the weekend into early next week, according to the Weather Service, and upper 90s. Low 100s may be reached in parts of San Francisco Bay region as well. Okay, so that's coming our way. Duncan McCown, freakishly cold in eastern England, go figure. Grateful Dan and Lightning Rod, you guys are Canadians, eh? You're in the Thunder Bay area. Cool. Lexi says California has lost its cool. Oh wow, Judy Truitt, our electric coupe is or co-op, sorry, is doing a planned outage for 7 hours on Tuesday. Maintenance, they say. Yeah, let's look at very quickly, and then we'll move on. I want to just look at the forecast for here through the week. Yeah, it's by Wednesday it's supposed to get to 100 degrees. So we're climbing. We're going to be going up in temperature and holding into the 90s the whole week at least. So that's where I'm at, Southern California. I imagine the rest of California is going to be experiencing much of the same. So, Grateful Dan, Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Okay, got it. Got it. Right, boiled up lamp posts, October surprise. Well, yeah, we generally continue to get hot and very warm weather through October. Summer doesn't really end until November here for sure. Uh, and if you all remember, the first game of the World Series, was it 2 years ago or 3 years ago, at Dodger Stadium registered 102 degrees at game time, which was like 6 p.m. at night. It was 102 degrees on October 31st or 30th, something like that. Yeah, so we could definitely continue to get hot weather. Anyways, let's move on to this article from phys.org. Tree rings show, this is from September 25th. Tree rings show scale of Arctic pollution is worse than previously thought. Faster than expected, worse than thought. Where have we heard those words before? The largest ever study of tree rings from Norilsk in the Russian Arctic has shown that the direct and indirect effects of industrial pollution in the region and beyond are far worse than previously thought. An international team of researchers led by the University of Cambridge has combined ring width and wood chemistry measurements from living and dead trees with soil characteristics and computer modeling to show that the damage done by decades of nickel and copper mining has not only devastated local environments, but also affected the global carbon cycle. The extent of damage done to the boreal forest, the largest land biome on Earth, can be seen in the annual growth rings of trees near Norilsk, where die-off has spread up to 100 kilometers. The results are reported in the journal Ecology Letters. Norilsk in northern Siberia is the world's northernmost city, with more than 100,000 people in one of the most polluted places on Earth. Since the 1930s, intensive mining of the area's massive nickel, copper, and palladium deposits, combined with few environmental regulations, has led to severe pollution levels. A massive oil spill in May 2020 has added to the extreme level of environmental damage in the area. Not only are the high levels of airborne emissions from Norilsk industrial complex responsible for the direct destruction of around 24,000 square kilometers of boreal forest since the 1960s, surviving trees across much of the high northern latitudes are suffering as well. The high pollution levels cause declining tree growth, which in turn have an effect of the amount of carbon that can be sequestered in the boreal forest. However, while the link between pollution and forest health is well known, it has not been able to explain the divergence problem in dendrochronology or the study of tree rings, a decoupling of tree ring width from rising air temperatures seen since the 1970s. Using the largest ever data set of tree rings from both living and dead trees to reconstruct the history and intensity of Norilsk's forest dieback, the researchers have shown how the amount of pollution spewed into the atmosphere by mines and smelters is at least partially responsible for the phenomenon of Arctic dimming, providing new evidence to explain the divergence problem. Using the information stored in thousands of tree rings, we can see the effects of Norilsk's uncontrolled environmental disaster over the past 9 decades, said Professor Ulf Bunken from Cambridge's Department of Geography, who led the research. While the problem of sulfur emissions and forest dieback has been successfully addressed in much of Europe, for Siberia, we haven't been able to see what the impact has been, largely due to the lack of long-term monitoring data. The expansion of annually resolved and absolutely dated tree ring width measurements compiled by the paper's first author, Alexander Kiryanov, along with new high-resolution measurements of wood and soil chemistry, allowed the researchers to quantify the extent of Norilsk's devastating ecosystem damage, which peaked in the 1960s. We can see that the trees near Norilsk started to die off massively in the 1960s due to rising pollution levels, said Bunkin. Since atmospheric pollution in the Arctic accumulates due to large-scale circular patterns, we expanded our study far beyond the direct effects of Norilsk's industrial sector and found that trees across the high northern latitudes are suffering as well. The researchers used a process-based forward model of boreal tree growth with and without surface irradiance forcing as a proxy for pollutants to show that Arctic dimming since the 1970s has substantially reduced tree growth. Arctic dimming. Arctic dimming is a phenomenon caused by increased particulates in the Earth's atmosphere, much like global dimming or aerosol masking effect. Whether from pollution, dust, or volcanic eruptions, the phenomenon partially blocks out sunlight, slowing the process of evaporation and interfering with the hydrological cycle. Global warming should be expected to increase the rate of boreal tree growth, but the researchers found that as the pollution levels peaked, the rate of tree growth in northern Siberia slowed. They found that the pollution levels in the atmosphere diminished the trees' ability to turn sunlight into energy with photosynthesis, and so they were not able to grow as quickly or as strong as they would in areas with lower pollution levels. What surprised us is just how widespread the effects of industrial pollution are. The scale of the damage shows just how vulnerable and sensitive the boreal forest is, said Bunkin. Given the ecological importance of this biome, the pollution levels across the high northern latitudes could have an enormous impact on the entire global carbon cycle. I guess that they would. We have 117 watching, 42 likes. Please like the video. If you're new, please subscribe. Basil Peterson, chemicals biomagnify in seals and whales. Well, or whales too. Cougar W says, my pet peeve is that trees do not sequester carbon, which you can fully understand as you watch them burn or be turned into toilet paper. They only sequester carbon if they're kept in the ground, right? Or if they're new trees or new growth or rewilded areas, untouched forest. Basil Extinction, Black Crow says, I'm Generation X extinction. I guess I'm Generation X. Well, I am Generation X as well, but Basil Peterson, we got our usual 2 dislikes. Yes, well, we'll let those people have fun with their mental instability, while they can. Because if you don't have anything else to do but to come here and downvote my video, truly, you must lead a very sad existence. But, Gen Exit. Yes, that's good. Boiled rope lamppost. Degeneration X. Rewild Human, says George Sacroclides. Indeed. Indeed. Osama, on the cusp of boomer doomer and gen extinction. Anyways, let's move on. Kind of what I wanted to get into talking about today. These timelines that are put forward by I don't know, by governments, by organizations, by panels, by the IPCC, by whoever might be interested in quote unquote saving the planet or preventing climate chaos or climate change or climate destruction. or even extinction. So Peter Kalmus, who I read a lot of tweets from, says, once again, for the people in the back, net zero by 2050 is straight up climate denial. And I completely agree with this sentiment, right? Straight up climate denial. As in denial of how bad the problem is, right? Because if you think that we have until 2050 to get to net zero, I mean, a lot of people might say that thinking that we even have time to do anything right now, there are some people who might insist that in itself is some form of climate denial, or some kind of break with reality, or an inability to accept reality, or whatever. But let's just say we were going to start right now to do something about climate change. Yeah, 2050, net zero by 2050 is way too late. And I believe personally that the sole purpose of putting out this kind of number is a way to, again, kick the can down the road. 30 years ago, we had 10 years to avoid a climate disaster, right? 30 years ago, we had 10 years. In 2018, we had 12 years to avoid a climate disaster again. So anybody who's saying like, oh, we got 30 more years to somehow get to net zero, and somehow this is going to, somehow we're going to leverage that net zero-ness into saving ourselves, or saving the planet, or avoiding widespread climate destruction. It's fairly delusional, right? Fairly delusional, big time. And the purpose of doing this, the purpose of putting out this date, is to kick the can down the road, to say, oh, we got 30 years, so we really got to, we're going to start implementing these measures, and we really got to do something now. And oh, golly gee, we've got this climate plan. It's robust, and it really does something, and it really, shows people that we're serious about this. And then, half the things get done, and the other half doesn't get done. It's, slower than expected. We didn't really make the cuts that we wanted to. And then all of a sudden it's 10 years later or 20 years later. And then you're 10 years away from this 2050. I mean, considering the fact that we may not even be here, or that life is going to look very, very different long before 2050. But let's say normalcy just continues to go on for another 20 years. Normalcy as we know it. And that actually would be a bad thing, right? Normalcy continuing to go on as we know it for another 20 years would, lock in whatever damage it is that we're continuing to do. But that's what the purpose of this is, right? Is to continue normalcy, right? You say, oh, we're going to get to net zero by 2050. That maintains in people's minds the idea that, like, we can continue with this normalcy, quote unquote. We can continue with this business as usual, and we'll tinker around the edges, and we'll make little changes, and in 30 years we'll get to our goal. Yay! And everything will still be normal, and we'll be fine, and we'll live in a city of the future, right? So, yeah, that's the whole purpose of this 2050 date. And again, to go back to what Peter Kalmus is saying, net zero by 2050 is straight up climate denial. By 2050 means comfortably in the future, right? So we can continue doing everything that we're doing, and we don't have to make any major drastic, that's the point. It's 30 years from now, we don't have to make any drastic changes. If you said we got to get to net zero by 2030, oh shoot, how do we do that? That means our entire system has to change real fast, right? Real fast. And nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to be made uncomfortable by the changes that we would have to implement in order to get to net zero by 2030. That's what 2050 means. So net zero means we can keep emitting now because our young people will magically clean up our emissions. Right. Right. So, anyways, he links. Huh? What? Hold on one second. I'm going to read this. Right. So somebody says, claiming, quote unquote, claiming that climate change is a Chinese hoax and ending emissions limitations is just the same as acknowledging that climate change is an issue and advocating for a plan that parallels the EU plan and advocating for lower emissions. Please stop with the false equivalencies. And this man, Anthony Tellis, says both lead to devastating increases in global temperatures that are existential threats. Acknowledging climate change with a weak net zero plan is in denial of the scientific data clearly showing that far more is necessary. Indeed. And somebody else says, I would absolutely love to hear a step-by-step plan on how to reach net zero emissions in 30 years that begins with, we need to keep fracking as a transitional energy source. Right, exactly. What I mean, all of this means kick the can down the road. Kick the can down the road. I'm going to read this article that he links. The linked article is South Korea declares climate emergency. Well, okay, that's good. But then they say sets net zero target for 2050. So yeah, it's a real emergency. We're going to do something about it in a couple of years. That'll be great. That's people are really trying to make a difference, and it's just really mean when you point out that, people are just really working hard and trying to do their best and make a difference. Right? We're on the path. I can't keep doing that voice. We're on the because I'm too angry to do that voice. We're on the path for climate destruction, and we're not doing nearly enough. But like, oh golly gee, if you say we're not doing nearly enough and you point out the truth of we're not doing nearly enough, and maybe these people that are doing, something, but they're very politically active and they shake hands with all the billionaire class and that are helping our climate destruction along, and they're like, please sir, may I have some more funding for my organization or my plan, in order to keep this game going that we're really doing something about climate change. Oh my God, if you say that they're might be part of the problem, you're really mean. You're a mean person. You're mean and you're bad. Anyways, just 2 days after China pledged to become carbon neutral by 2060, South Korea has declared a climate crisis and established a goal to go net zero by mid-century. All right. Good job, boys. The target, however, is non-binding. Right? So yes, these bold plans to go to net zero by 2050, and this is non-binding. So really, nobody really has to meet any targets or meet any goals, and there's no repercussions for not meeting these targets or these goals. It's just all agreed upon, and everybody's really nice. Really nice. We're all in agreement. Yes, we are. We're all in agreement. We all agree to this. And we're all really going to be nice about it. And we're just going to let people, monitor themselves. And then 10 years from now, when we realize we haven't been doing enough, oh, golly gee. Well, guys, that's a problem. Can you try and do better? Oh, now we only have 20 years left. Anyway, South Korea declared a climate crisis on Thursday and established a non-binding goal of reaching net zero emissions by 2050, making it the second East Asian nation to set a tougher climate target this week. A climate emergency resolution was passed by the country's National Assembly, and we'll see South Korea put together a special committee tasked with ramping up the nation's response to the threats of global warming. I guess I'm not going to be able to sign up for free. I don't really care. Maybe I can watch it. Maybe I can read this in another window. Let's see. Nope. Never. Anyways. task force will guide South Korea's climate action spending, gather input from stakeholders, review current climate and energy policies against its new ambitions, retool the country's workforce, and provide support for vulnerable groups. Well, all that sounds really, really nice. You know? All that sounds really, like well-meaning. If it actually meant that they were serious about doing something. Kevin Jensen says, we are all so obviously effed that I question free will. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, I have questions about free will. I don't know. I have questions about those who are in charge of lines of communication impinging on people making educated choices as well. Kevin Jensen says emitting CO2 at this rate will cause near-term abrupt planetary mass extinction every single time. Black Crow, the eco-business community, yuck. Right. Yes, free will obeys laws of physics, indeed. Right. You have free will. You totally have free will. Everybody has free will, but you need to eat. You need to breathe air. Right? You need to drink water. And free will goes right out the window when people don't have anything to eat and don't have any water to drink. Right? That, then people will do any motherfucking thing in order to get some water and some food, right? So free will be damned. What's up, Muzza? How you doing? Thanks for being here. So in addition to this article about South Korea, I wanted to cover, where is it? Well, some folks were bringing this up in the chat yesterday and today. China, said, hey, we care about climate change. This is from yesterday. China's carbon target moves big economies into radical climate consensus. Oh, do they? Really? Is this going to move big economies into radical climate consensus? Real quickly, in the Bloomberg green box over here on the left, the sidebar. Soccer pitches of forest lost this hour, 2,640, and it keeps on going. That's how quickly we're deforesting the planet. So, yeah. Supposedly, this is how much we're above the baseline, but this is a 1900s average, which I find a little dubious. So here's some disinformation right here for you. This is not where we are at. 0.94C. When it goes up to 1.5, they'll just move the baseline to whatever, the year 2000 or something like that. Anyways, can bold goals this week from Beijing to California keep hope alive for the 1.5C future? Guess what? We're at 1.5C, and we are going to be at 1.5C. If we're not already there, they're going to admit that we're at 1.5C real soon. Do I have to subscribe to Bloomberg Green? For crying out loud. I'm not going to. Anyways, sorry about that, guys. This was not on a paywall a couple of minutes ago, and now it is. After a week of far-reaching climate promises measured over decades, 4 of the world's 6 largest economies have now proposed ending dates for their carbon emissions. Well, all right. President Xi Jinping's surprise announcement at the annual United Nations climate meeting this week committed China to reaching carbon neutrality by 2060. Hold on one second. I'm going to just see if I can find this on a free news site somewhere so I can read the whole thing. Or at least a little more. Let's go to Vox.com. Let's see. This is from Vox. China just stepped up its climate goals. Is it enough to avert climate chaos? Well, that's a really good question by Vox. Thank you, Vox, for asking a pertinent question. Is it enough? Imagine China, the world's top emitter of carbon, which in 2019 released nearly double the emissions of the U.S. with almost zero coal power plants. Well, that's odd because they're still building coal power plants right now. So how are they going to get to net zero in 2060 when they're building coal power plants right now? They're also funding coal power plants in other parts of the world. Imagine it with zero gasoline-powered cars and with more than 4 times the 1,200 gigawatts of solar and wind power capacity installed across the world today. This could become a reality by mid-century if China follows through on President Xi Jinping's latest commitment to addressing the climate emergency. The United Nations General Assembly on September 22nd, Xi Jinping announced that China will strive to be carbon neutral by 2060. Good God, that's 40 years from now. So they are really kicking that can down the road, right? They're really like, man, we got a lot of capitalism to do before we get to net zero carbon neutrality. Humankind can no longer afford to ignore the repeated warnings of nature and go down the beaten path of extracting resources without investing in conservation. Well, that sounds very nice, Xi Jinping. Going carbon neutral means that China would remove the same amount of carbon it's emitting into the atmosphere. Carbon neutral. Well, I guess that's the same as a net zero or something like that. But I don't know. I would think that, well, yes, net zero, I guess. Gross zero would be the actual goal that we want to go into, right? Zero carbon emissions. That would be the actual goal we want to achieve. They're not talking about that. So by 2060, China would theoretically only use clean energy sources and capture or offset any remaining emissions. But Chinese officials have yet to define exactly what that would look like, right? Because they won't do that. They can't do it. Why can they not do it? Because if you're actually committed to lowering emissions that much, you would be losing a lot of your industrial civilization. You would be losing a lot of the business as usual that is going on right now, and on some level you'd have to accept that there would have to be a degrowth in your industrial output and in your economy in order to do that. You'd have to accept and admit in some form of degrowth scheme. And they will never do that. Not now. They might in the future when things are really bad, maybe in 2040. But right now, they will never do that. They will never do that. And neither will South Korea, neither will California, neither will any other country unless they are telling the truth or willing to tell the truth. Right now, we don't have anybody in office or in the government right now that is willing to tell that kind of truth. Not even progressives, not even on a progressive level. There are no progressives out there that are willing to tell that kind of truth. And not be, maybe not be sent out of town on a rail. Still, the target puts China more closely in alignment with the European Union, the UK, and other countries that are committed to carbon neutrality by 2050. China was like, you know what, I'll see your 2050 and I'll raise you 2060. Wait, that's not how it works. Which the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change said is required. That shows you what a joke the IPCC is required to prevent 1.5 degrees. I mean, right here we have gone over the cliff, the reality cliff, right? Right now they're just talking about, some fairyland Earth where somehow we're not close to 1.5 already, and somehow we're going to stay under 1.5 for 30 more years. Are you insane? These people are insane, right? And yes, as Peter Kalmus said, they are engaging in climate denialism. The IPCC is engaging in climate denialism because they're not telling you the truth. That 1.5 is very soon come this decade, if not in the next 5 years, if not already breached. And somehow we have 30 more years to make these changes. So they're denying the truth. 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming in the U.S. Some states and cities have moved in that direction too. For instance, former Governor Jerry Brown signed an executive order in 2018 for California to be carbon neutral by 2045. 2045. Okay, I'll raise you 2050. I'll see you 2045. Whoa. Bold moves. Michigan's governor made the same commitment Wednesday. Well, alrighty. Along with the pledge to be carbon neutral by 2060, Xi Jinping also announced that China would submit a stronger set of goals under the Paris Agreement and that China would aim to peak carbon emissions by 2030, upping the commitment from around 2030. Okay. Okay. Well, hey, I hope y'all do that, but I'm going to say right now that they're way more committed to business as usual. They're way more committed to industrial growth than they are to curbing emissions. And they will have to do some kind of pretzel logic or pretzel accounting, right? They're going to have to offshore some of these emissions somewhere, either in the books or in some other country, right? Or they're going to have to eliminate some of the emissions accounting, in order to make it look like they're going in the right direction, because they need to continue to grow economically in their minds, in their paradigm, in the way that they think, right, in their mindset. Meanwhile, in his UNGA remarks, President Trump defended his decision to withdraw the U.S. from the one-sided Paris Agreement while criticizing China for rampant pollution. Increasingly, China is demonstrating it will use climate as a way to upstage the U.S., with Xi repeatedly committing to incremental climate action on the international stage in recent years. Xi Jinping's climate pledge at the UNGA minutes after Trump's speech is clearly a bold and well-calculated move. It demonstrates Xi's consistent interest in leveraging the climate agenda for geopolitical purposes. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, on some level, this just makes everybody feel good. Oh, we understand there's a problem. We're going to do something about it. Oh, yeah, everybody claps. Everybody golf clap. Yay. We really care. And that's about all it's worth right now, is a golf clap, right? Oh, we declared a climate emergency. Oh, here. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Climate emergency, yes. Right? Meanwhile, would you like to join me on my yacht for a cruise? It would be wonderful. What about that climate emergency pledge? Oh, bother. Pshaw. Anyways, I'll read a little more of this. The rosy assessment might leave you wondering why China didn't embrace carbon neutrality sooner. Well, hold on one second. They found that it is technically and economically possible for China to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 at a very small economic cost to growth and consumer living standards, and China is well placed to gain technological competitive advantage from the transition to net zero. So we're talking about tech, right? We are talking about full-bore technology. We're not talking about any kind of degrowth or rewilding or living in balance with balance and harmony with nature, right? None of that. We're talking about technological innovations to make sure that we can still grow our economy and have consumer living standards and, bring down these carbon emissions. At what cost? This rosy assessment might leave you wondering why China didn't embrace carbon neutrality sooner. Some real concerns include the massive social transition as Rust Belt regions move away from coal and steel, the implications for international competitiveness if other countries don't decarbonize at the same pace, and how the local and national governments will pay for new infrastructure. Blah, blah, blah. The study scenario doesn't get into all these details and is just one possible route, but it shows the magnitude of changes that China will have to make in the coming years and the challenges involved. Start with the power sector. In keeping with the expert consensus on decarbonization, the crux of China's odyssey is electrifying its economy as much as possible, right? Of course. From switching to electric vehicles to using electricity instead of coal for some industrial production. To get to carbon neutral, China's current electricity generation will have to more than double to 15,000 terawatt hours by 2050. RMI projects, all figures in this section are from the report unless otherwise noted. So let's look at this. Hopefully y'all can see this. China's installed power generation capacity. This is in 2016. Mostly coal. China's electricity generation, mostly coal right now. Then hydro is a large one. Solar is fairly large in there, or natural gas. Solar looks like. Storage. What else is in there? Natural gas. And look at how many gigawatts they're projecting to power. So I can't tell. I'm actually a little confused by the colors in this picture. Anyways, it looks like solar is fairly large in their mix in 2016, ish. But they're projecting that wind and solar will make up the vast majority of their electric generation, then storage, then biomass and other, then natural gas, and nuclear. They're going to add some nuclear in there. Yeah. Is that actually possible? And they're looking at a lot of nuclear to be in the electricity generation component. So, yeah. In 2019, almost 70% of China's electricity generation came from thermal sources, 90% of which is coal power. Hold on. I'm going to read that again. In 2019, almost 70% of China's electricity generation came from thermal sources, 90% of which is coal power. In the RMI scenario, by 2050, that will drop to just 7%, which will be natural gas coupled with carbon capture technology. To replace fossil fuels, China will make wind and solar the center of its power grid. Combined, they will supply 70% of electricity. China already leads the world in wind and solar, but capacity would have to increase nearly 15-fold. And investment would have to double for solar and triple or quadruple for wind. The difficulty of decarbonizing the power sector is improving the flexibility of the system, said Chen Ji, a principal at the Rocky Mountain Institute in Beijing, who co-authored the report. To back up this renewable energy grid, when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing, the country would rely on a vast system of batteries and pumped hydro storage, as well as the remaining thermal capacity, expanded nuclear power, hydropower, and biomass. According to the scenario, decarbonizing the power grid is just the first step. Alrighty. To make steel in 2050, the RMI scenario proposes a combination of recycling steel and using hydrogen or coal with carbon capture to produce new steel. So they don't know how to make steel without using coal. And then there's that. The model calls for a 50-50 split between the two methods. Nowhere in here are they talking about degrowing the economy or degrowing their population or degrowing consumption. Anyways, yeah, it doesn't. There's a big gap between the amount of coal that they use right now to electrify their grid. And what I was gonna say, what I was saying was, China is, they want to make all these moves to get to net zero, and they're not talking. Nobody's talking about degrowing the economy, degrowing the population, degrowing the consumer culture. And nobody is discussing that, right? No, not, and nobody's discussing that in the U.S. either. Is anybody discussing that in Europe? Supposedly, these places where they're so progressive and they so care about climate change, guys, we're gonna do something. Guys, we're gonna really, here we go. We're gonna try it. Not one of those people, not one of those politicians, not one of those billionaires, not one of those very famous climate scientists or climate, communicators. Not one of those people is saying, well, what we need to do is stop consuming so much. What we need to do is stop, somehow convince people that a growth economy is not a good thing. It's actually the thing that's killing the planet. So we need to figure out another economy entirely, right? The economy we have now is the problem. So you have to actually stop that economy and do something totally different. Nobody is saying that, right? Are they telling their citizens to eat less? Tina Clark says China is telling their citizens to eat less. Yeah, I think that they are doing that probably because they're going to start running out of food, right? I don't think that has anything to do with degrowing their economy, right? They're telling people to eat less but buy more, probably, right? Keep buying your phones, keep buying your clothes, keep buying shoes, keep buying washing machines, but maybe eat a little less food. So yeah. Hey guys, remember to like, share, and subscribe, and you can support the channel. The links below, PayPal, Patreon, Square. Also, if you'd like to watch the live streams, you can watch the live streams on my Patreon channel. You can subscribe for as little as $1. So hopefully I will see you over there, and thanks so much.